we should be live streaming. Yay. All right. Hi. Hi. I am so super excited about this class.
Me too.
Yeah, really. This is something I've been, wanting to do for years. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being my kosher guinea pigs. We taught this class I've been here almost 30 years. I think the last time I taught this was like 20 years ago. And it really, like, Sherry Nichols took it, Norma Fowler took it, all these people who really later became these, like, big, like, we love Hebrew aficionados. And as I said in the initial, sort of publicity for this, the only real prerequisite for this is that people know the sounds the letters make. Like, we're not gonna, like, review like that. If you can even slowly but fairly accurately, like, piece words together, we're good.
Oh, okay.
And this uses a lot of the same vocabulary over and over again, okay? So, the first Hebrew primer for adults, right? It says the Adult Beginner's Path to Biblical Hebrew. By the way, the publisher for this is a company called EKS, and you can get it from their website or you can get it from Amazon. Phil said he got it from Amazon in a couple of days, okay? The kind of Hebrew that they're using here, that they're teaching you biblical Hebrew, will also be totally applicable to the prayer book. So it's kind of the same project, right? They actually, this company EKS makes another book called Prayer Book Hebrew the Easy Way, but it's much more limited in what it tries to do. And I figured if we're going to put this kind of time into it, right. Now the only request that I have of y'all is, I know everybody's got a life, they have responsibilities, this is not like the center of your existence. I'm going to assign homework each week, and to the extent that you can do it, please do, because I want this class to be fun, and I want it to continue to be fun, and I think part of what's going to make it fun is forward motion, right? So if we're, and I'll try to be reasonable, and you're here, you're taking your time, right? So you're going to tell me, honestly, that was too much homework, or we're going too fast, or we're going too slow, or whatever. Okay, I want it to be fun, but I want it also to be, like I said, doable. Okay? All right. So let's take a look at our books here, and let's go over. I'm going to show you a few things here, okay, which you can look at on. We're not going to do, but you can look at on your own. Oh, la'asot b'divrei Torah, yeah.
Yeah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Beautiful. All right. So on page 1, right, they do have here a reviewing the alphabet section. And if you look at like pages 2 and 3, they even give you what cursive looks like, right? And you can, anybody here, you can use that to review as is helpful to you, okay? And there's tons. You look at pages 6 and 7. There's tons of practice reading, right? I like the way on page 7 it says, read the following real Hebrew words. They're not fake Hebrew words, they're real Hebrew words. No, because sometimes at the beginning you're just reading like nonsense syllables, right? Yeah, ba, 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 right. Okay, so then chapter 2, you can see they move pretty quickly, is the second half of the alphabet. And they do a lot of reading, like if you look at the top of page 9, they're doing a lot of reading here to help you distinguish between like the mem and the tet, and the nun and the gimel, and the nun and the chaf, like letters that you might confuse because they look somewhat similar. Okay. Yeah. So, and there's tons of practice reading on pages 14 and 15. Yeah. All right. It is worth taking a minute to look at, I said we weren't going to spend time on reading, but it's worth taking a minute to look at some of what's in chapter 3. Okay. So they talk to you here about the Shva. The Shva, might as well use the whiteboard since we schlepped it over here. That's the Shva, right? It's the 2 dots, one under the other. And it's talking a little bit about the Shva. So they say, look in the middle of page 16. The Shva at the beginning of a word. A Shva at the beginning of a Hebrew word is always pronounced with a short slurred sound. Shva is actually an English word too, and like in old dictionaries they would have the upside down E,
Yeah.
the Shva,
Yeah.
right? So like you think of a word like rhythm, or spasm, right? Where there isn't even a vowel in the last syllable, it's just a little teeny, like the teeniest little like sound you can make. So what they're explaining here, which is pretty intuitive, I think, right, is that a shva at the beginning of a word is always pronounced with a short sound, right? It has to make a sound. It commences the word, right? So look at the first line, right? The line underneath that where it says, read the following line aloud, it's kali. You see that? Kali, little right? And then ne'um, and then katav, and then the famous Shema, like Shema Yisrael, right? And then mechal, which is a big high holiday liturgy word. It means to like forgive. Salach lanu, mechal lanu. Everybody sing, right? Okay, me'od, very, right? Salach, and mechal, right? So, okay, so you have that. Now wait a minute. Why did the thing suddenly turn red? Is it still working?
Recording? I mean, is that?
It should be. I just don't know. Oh, maybe it means it's recording.
Yeah,
Duh.
red camera on.
Not the rabbi.
Yes, stop the rabbi.
It didn't take long.
Okay, I look at the camera and go like that. All right. So a shva at the beginning of a word always makes a sound. Okay. A shva. Look at them further down the page. A shva at the end of a word is always a silent vowel, and that is not pronounced at all. You have already seen this under the letter chaf. So like look at the words at the bottom, right? Lach, at, right? Charat, elech, mat, derech, ach, right?
So it's more like an aspiration at the end of a word.
Yeah, so here's the deal. I don't know if they actually teach you this in here or not, I don't remember, but I'll show you quickly. So there's two kinds of shva'im, right? Okay? There is something called the shva na and the shva nach. Okay? Na in Hebrew would look like this. That's a crappy looking iron. Okay. That doesn't even look like an iron. Let's try that again. Okay. Shva na. So the root would have a vav in here. Noah or nua means to move. Okay. So a shva na is a shva that is in motion. It makes a sound. Nach means to rest. Right? So a shva na commences a syllable. A shva nach brings it to rest. That's why one is silent and one's not, right? So obviously, anything that's under the first letter of a word is going to in fact commence a syllable, right? So that's going to be a shva na, it's going to move. If it's at the end of a word or the end of a syllable, then it's going to be a shva nach, it brings it to rest, okay? So it's only silent when it's a shva nach, and then it makes that little sound like shema, all right? Now look at the top of page 17. It says, when a shva appears alone in the middle of a word, it usually falls at the end of a syllable and is silent. Okay? So you have the Hebrew word for meatloaf. Meatloaf. You have the Hebrew word for carpool. Carpool. You have the Hebrew word for concave. Concave. Right? And then it says, read the following words aloud. So if you want to try, we'll read them together. You see? So the first word is yishteh. Ooh, you are good readers. Okay? The next word is nafalnu, right? In fact, you know what that could remind you of, right? Ashamnu, bagadnu, gazalnu, tafalnu, shaker. So there's a shva in there, right? Okay, and so on and so forth, right? So all of those are in other words, when you see a shva alone in the middle of a word, just guess that it's silent. And what it means that it's silent is it is ending a syllable. Make sense? I love it when it makes sense. Okay. Then we have the situation where two shvas appear side by side in the middle of a word. In that case, the first one is always silent, and the second one has a little sound. Why? Because the first one is bringing the preceding syllable to a close, and the second one is initiating the next one. Right? So basically, the sounded shva initiates syllables. So look at the first one, right? The first one is yichtavu. You see that word? Yichtavu means they will write. Like ketubah, it's the same root as ketubah, right? So yich is the first syllable, te is the second, vu is the last. Is that making sense?
Yep.
You guys are awesome, all right? Kodshecha. Kodshecha, right? Now, why it's an and not an you know, when you're older, we'll explain it. No, we'll it's like sex, you know, we'll tell you about it when you're
I'll
older.
understand now.
No, we'll get there. Right. Okay. The next one is Yishmeru, which is awfully close to Yismechu, right? So
Yeah.
Yismechu is two shvas in a row. Yismechu, all right? Tilbashu would mean y'all will wear. It's a word, right? And then the last one, Rag lechem. Yeah, okay. Now they've got all this reading practice, right? And there is some, like, if you look at the second word on the first line, what's the second word on the first line of that reading practice? Yizkor. There's your Yizkor service. Yizkor means he will remember, okay? Go to the last word in that line. What do you have? Yisrael, right? You don't know, right? Okay, so we're good. Now, look at the first word in the next line. You get a bunch of people together at somebody's house. Minyan, right? Min. You don't say minyan, right? It's just minyan. Everybody gets the idea?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And there's lots of there that you could do. All right. This next part, you can live a good, healthy, long life and never know this, but I find it interesting, so you have to suffer. All right. So, all right. Look at the top of page. I told you we're gonna have fun. Look at the top of page 18. All right. Combination vowels. Now you're gonna understand why these vowels exist. Some letters, aleph, hey, ayin, and chet, are difficult to pronounce with the shva because they're either guttural, like chet, and even actually ayin, which if you listen to somebody from Tunisia speak Hebrew, it's a glottal stop, right? The aleph and the ayin are not silent. They are the sound of your throat opening, right? So if you say you're not using your tongue like da 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 or ta ta ta, or your lips is not a labial like ba 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 or ma ma ma, right? When you go what's breaking it up into different sounds? It's a glottal stop, right? Now you don't need that in English because we don't have words like Yaakov in English, or Kinaan, Canaan, right? Or Eloheinu melech ha'olam, right? We don't have words in English where two vowel sounds butt up against each other.
Depends on your dialect.
It depends, yeah.
No, Liverpool.
Yeah. So
Classic,
give it to
like the double T would be buttle.
Buttle.
Yeah,
Buttle.
that's right.
Right, because you
British
just
do
drop
that
it.
a lot,
Yeah, buttle instead of the double T, they use a
A lot of
Or
glottal.
younger
button. Is it button? Button.
teenagers speak that way too.
Yeah.
They do that.
So like in
The T's, double
in
T's.
English, if I was gonna write Yaakov and wanted to make sure people would pronounce it correctly, I would translate it like this,
Yeah.
right? And essentially, the apostrophe would be like the ayin.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's a glottal stop. There used to actually be, I don't know what it was, but I know this is true. There was an old grammar book that said that aleph and ayin are the sound of incipient regurgitation. It's like someone about to vomit. That's what it sounds like, right? And actually, if you listen to Hebrew speakers in, no, you don't have to. If you listen to Hebrew speakers in Israel who come from what the Israelis call Edot HaMizrach, which means the eastern tribes, which is like people from like Yemen and Morocco and Tunisia and Kurdistan and places like that, right? You will hear the difference between an aleph and an ayin. I can't even do one of their ayin. It's like ayin. It comes from like deep in the throat, right? Okay, so here's what they're basically telling you, right? I'll summarize the rest of this. When you see one of these combination vowels like that, which you pronounce but it's got the two dots next to it, right? Or when you see this crazy guy, right? With the two dots, right? What you're seeing there, what they're saying is that the vowel that was gonna be here grammatically should have just been a shva, but we are elongating it with the or the because it's under one of these letters under which it would be unpronounceable. So like, for example, like, how would you even pronounce that? A hey with the shva. Like, right? It's like nothing, right? Or ayin would be just like there would be your incipient regurgitation, right? Chet, okay? So basically, whenever you see one of these combo vowels, it will pretty inevitably be under one of these gutturals. That's what it's there for, and it's expanded into that to make it pronounceable, right? Right? Why do I say that it should have been one of those vowels? Because a lot of conjugating verbs in Hebrew is taking the root, the three-letter root, and putting it through a series of patterned vowel changes. And sometimes one of those vowels is the shva. It should have a shva there, but if one of the root letters, you know, if the timing is such that one of the root letters is one of these gutturals, then you have one of those expanded vowels. Make sense? Yeah. This is the CBI brain trust in this room, I have to say. Very, very bright group. All right. I'm not going to worry about the rest of this. Okay. So there's tons of reading practice on 22 and 23. Ta-da! Look how we're moving along here. This will not be our usual pace, 4 chapters a week, but now, yeah. All right, now we have nouns and verbs masculine. I am not going to do the oral review reading with you if you have the time. It's nice to practice, but it feels to me like people here are good Hebrew readers, so here we go. Let's look at page 26. So it tells you that from now on, each chapter includes a vocab list, right? Each word in the vocabulary list has been selected because it appears frequently in the Bible. Okay, so this is where the homework is, right? Most of the homework really is learning, making yourself flashcards, however you want to do it, and just learning these. Some of you may know some of them already. So, Sarah, what's the very first vocabulary word?
Zachar.
Go from the other side. Let's do Hebrew style. That's even easier. Avraham, right? Which obviously is Abraham. All right. Faith, what's the one under Avraham?
Ish.
Ish. So Ish is a man. Obviously it's masculine. Okay. Ellen. Bait, right? Now the reason that they have that little, is that a less than or a greater than sign?
Less than.
Thank you. I needed an engineer to tell me because I can't remember. What do I know, right? So that's just an accent.
It's also a mapach.
It's also mapach, right? So yeah, good. So that is an accent mark, bait. You all know this intuitively from coming to services so much, even if you have never thought of it. When in doubt, usually the accented syllable of a Hebrew word is the last syllable. Okay. Sometimes it is shifted, and it is shifted. This is little bonus info here. It is shifted based on certain vowel combinations. So the patach under the bet, that dash in bait, and then the chirik, the names of the vowels aren't really important, the dot under the yud, that combination, patach chirik, is one where the first syllable is accented. So bait, right? Or does anybody know how to say water?
Mayim.
Mayim. Not mayim, which would be mayim. Bait, right? Another one that you'll really recognize is when you have the 3 dots twice, the segel twice in a row, melech, kelev, right? Right. Kelevra, bad doggy, right? That's what that means, right? So, yeah.
So it's segelet words.
Segelet words.
Double
segel, first syllable instead of second, right? Another one, this is for fun, another one is, there isn't. Usually I'm just resigned to smearing my palm all over the board, but we must have had a good week in fundraising, so there's an eraser. Okay, so another one is when you have, I'm just making this to be like some letter, right? When you have the, what's called a cholom chaser, the O without the stem, just the dot, and then when the vowel right after that is an right? O-eh, then the first one is also accented. So how do you say morning? Boker, not boker, boker. How do you say darkness? Choshech, right? Yotzer or uvore choshech, right? Not choshech, right? So there's another one of those. When you have that vowel combo, when it's segala, when you have 2 es in a row, when you have a and then e, it's like that. And then what's the other one that's common? Not the little t vowel, not the kamats, but this specific one, when you have the patach, the 2 dashes twice in a row, okay? How do you say gate? Sha'ar, right? How do you say, I don't know, I can't think of another one right now, but there's one. Okay, so that's right. So let's keep going with the verbs. So I think Allison, we were up to you. What's the one under bait?
Bain?
Bain, son. Okay, Phil.
Davar.
Okay,
Davar.
davar, right? So davar means word or thing, and it is a root of tons of different really important words. Okay, let's go back around. You got another name, Sarah. What do you have?
David.
David, right? David, FYI, if you vocalize it differently and you put just a dot under, if you take the other vowels away and put a dot over the vav in the middle, it becomes dod, which means beloved, which is what the name David actually means. It means beloved. Yeah, David, dod, it's the same root. What's the next one?
Dodi Li. My
Dodi
beloved.
Li, my beloved is Anila Dodi Dodi Li. Beautiful, good. All right, Faith, what do you got? Who? This is where Hebrew gets cruel. It's really cruel for English speakers with the pronouns. So who means he?
Me
Yeah.
means
Yeah.
who? Me means who means he, and he means she.
Right, and then they say and dag is fish. Is also like the other one.
In
Me is who?
In modern Hebrew is pointless.
Yeah.
Finishing.
It's pointless, right? It has no vowels. Right.
So are we gonna get into talking about the vav, the stem, and what
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Yeah, we are. What specifically are you curious
Well,
about?
that, we learn it, if you learn like Hebrew alphabet, that's a vowel, it's a vowel and a consonant, and
Right.
a lot of times kids get confused with it at the beginning, like a stem with a dot at the beginning of a word, they wanna say vu, because it's a vowel with
Yeah.
a vu, and,
Yeah.
and I don't know how to
Right.
explain that.
Right. Well, let me just see. I want to see if we skipped. No, we haven't done this yet.
Anyway, it's
When we
just-
get
it's
actually one place you're going to get some of that is when we get to the word for and, which in Hebrew is a prefix v. We learn about why it's u sometimes and why it's v other times, and we'll keep asking those questions.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to it. I would answer it now, except it's a rabbit hole that's going to stop us from doing
it's
this.
okay.
But
That's
yeah,
why I
what,
was like, are we ever going
yes,
to
we
at
are.
some point?
We're also going to learn what the word et is for.
Yay.
Which which was like sex when I was in Hebrew school. It was like, yeah, you don't need to know that now. When you get older, we'll tell you about that. And did they ever tell us? No. That's why all these Jews are Buddhists, right? Because they never told them what et means. If they had told them, probably not. All right.
The concept is like in Spanish too.
Do they have that actually in Spanish?
Yeah, well, in a certain respect, but we won't go into it.
Okay. All right. I can be the king of tangents, but I can also exercise restraint. All right. Let's look at the top one. Who were you even up to? I forgot.
Me.
Okay. What's the top of the second column there?
Zachar.
Right, Zachar means remembered, right? He remembered. Next one, Allison.
Melech.
Look at what it says.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's an ah. Malach.
Right, yeah, totally. All right, wait a minute. Hang on one second, because I
My
think,
eyesight's not so good.
no, and I think that hang on. I think that the app may have just crashed. Let's give it a second. Give me a second, guys.
Yeah, this one's Melech. The next one is Melech. Malach. So when's a verb?
Yep.
When's a noun?
Okay, we're good. Okay, we're good now. All right, sorry about that. Yeah, so, right, so you notice here, well, here's a good example, right? You see Zachar, which would actually be he remembered, right? That would be the form, right? It's kamatz, little t vowel, and then the patach, right? And then malach, same vowels, right? So there is a beginning of like a verb pattern, right? The next word is melech. There's your noun. There's king, right? Good. Okay. Who are we up to?
Me?
Phil. What's the next one with the nun?
Na'ar.
Right, now there's your two pataks, right? So it's na'ar, right? Accent on the first syllable, right? Na'ar, right? So it's like sha'ar, that the first accent syllable, so it's like a youth or a young man. Okay? Next one, Sarah.
Ahmad.
Ahmad means stood, right? Now again, Zachar, Malach, Ahmad, you see it's all the same verb. So there's a little snippet of some conjugation there. All right, who are we up to? Faith.
Shama.
Shama, right, we know from Shema, right? He heard or he listened. And then what's the last one there, Ellen?
Shamar.
Right, okay. And then they tell you, right, which is like where Shomrei Shabbat comes from, right? So he says in the vocabulary for each chapter, the words that are not accented on the last syllable, which is kind of the default, right, will be shown with an accent mark. These words, Bait, Melech, Na'ar are all accented. Okay. Dun, 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 dun. 2-word sentences. It's like we're toddlers, right? We're putting together our first 2-word sentences. Okay? In both Hebrew and English, a sentence is a group of words that express a complete thought. I'll read them, okay? David Zachar, David remembered, right? Hu Amad, he stood. Ish Shama, a man heard or listened, right? Melech Malach, a king ruled, right? Avraham Shamar, right? Abraham guarded. By the way, just as we saw it here, so when we take the Torah out of the ark, we're singing Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimloch. It's perfect participle and imperfect, right? God Malach, God reigned. God Melech, God is ruler, right? It's not really a verb there. Adonai Yimloch, God will reign, Le'olam Va'ed, forever and ever.
Present, past, and future.
Yeah, although, right, or if you want to be fancy, I think here they talk about perfect. It's perfect because it's completed action, it's finished, right? Imperfect, that hasn't happened yet. And then Hebrew doesn't really have a present tense, it has this weird participle form, which we'll learn about. Okay, and then Abraham Shamar, Abraham guarded. In English, the verb normally follows the subject. David remembered, he stood. In Hebrew, the verb usually precedes the subject, but may also follow it. Okay, so, David Zachar, it could also be Zachar David. Okay, more in biblical or literary Hebrew than in modern Hebrew. Okay, usually in Hebrew you would say David Zachar, not Zachar David, but it's got a little bit of a more flowery sort of feel to it, I think.
So say that again, the verb in things that are more
I feel like this is first, or in Hebrew the verb does not usually precede the subject. I think it's the opposite. In Hebrew usually, like, it will be like, Steve Zachar, Steve remembered, right? Ellen Shamra, Ellen watched, right? Or so forth. Phil Katav, Phil wrote. But you could also say Katav, Phil, and you could do it sometimes for emphasis, if you wanted to emphasize that it was so-and-so who did it. But what they're basically saying is you can go either way and it's fine. So he stood, going down to the bottom of the page, could be Hu Amad, right? But you could also say Amad Hu, but it would sound really funky like in Tel Aviv, like you wouldn't talk like
Not
that.
in modern.
Not in modern Hebrew, no. All right, we go on. Are we okay? Everybody okay so far?
Oh, yeah.
We're doing good? All right.
Those were all masculine verbs.
Yes, they were masculine verbs in the perfect tense, in what we would call past tense. Later on, you'll learn about verb cases. This is all in what's called the kal or the pa'al, like simple action. Okay. The subject of a sentence is a noun or a pronoun that performs the action in the sentence. Right. A noun is a word that names a person, place, object, or idea. The nouns in the vocabulary of this chapter are Abraham, Ish, man, Bait, house, Bain, son, Davar, word or thing, David, Melech, king, Na'ar, young man. Pronoun is a word used in place of a noun, right? For example, the words she and he and it are pronouns. The vocabulary of this chapter introduces the pronoun who, he. I want to say something here that actually just last night somebody was querying me about this, which was, what about non-binary folks, and what about gender fluidity, and what about all that? And what I said is, I would have to Google this, but I know there are people in Israel working on coming up with accepted ways of dealing with gender. We're used to the fact that Hebrew is unusual. English is unusually ungendered. If I say, favorite example is if I say I love you, you have no idea who I'm talking to or how many people I'm talking to. In Hebrew, you would know. And I think in most other languages, a lot of other languages, romance languages.
The romance languages are all
right.
gendered, yeah.
Right. But Hebrew is specific not only in terms of gender, it's also specific in terms of number. Right? So there's a different you pronoun for one man, one woman, a group of men, or a group of women, so it's very specific. So how do you sort of loosen that up? And that's, people are working on it.
So, just as a little aside, because we do the morning blessings, and we say, Sha'asani Badr Ben Harim.
Right.
And so with the kids, what I've been saying is, you know, cause they wanna know, like, what does that mean? And I would say, like, if you identify as male, you would say this, if you identify as female, you can say this, and I really wanna say, like,
Yeah.
There's no they.
when the, yes, when
Right.
the non-binary form of that is, you know, sort of like, there's
Yeah.
some kind of agreement, it would be great to be able to.
I'm gonna look it up
Yeah.
online and see, cause I know I've read about people
Okay.
working on that. You know, and we've had trans kids in the religious school, right? So it's actually a living issue.
Yeah.
Fun fact, surgical group in Austin is the one that performs all of the transgender surgeries in Israel.
Really? Yeah. 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 Well, you know, we're here to like share knowledge, so there you go. Okay. All right. Verbs. A verb is a word that describes action, right? So you have 4 verbs here. Zachar, remembered. Malach, ruled. Amad, stood. Shama, heard. And Shamar, kept regarded. Now the cool thing about those that makes them easy to learn is you all know examples of those, right? Zachar, you know Yizkor, right? Which is the memorial service, so there's remember, right? Malach, you know Melech HaOlam and all these other Melech words, right? Amad, right? One name for the standing part of the service is the Amidah from Amad, right? And right. Ya'amod or Ta'amod or some other verb form we're going to come up with, right? To call people up to the Torah, right? And then Shama, like Shema, and then Shamar, Shomrei Shabbat, right? To guard or to keep. Okay. The meaning of the perfect tense. English verbs describe action in the past, present, and future tenses. Biblical Hebrew has only 2 tenses, perfect, which describes completed action, and imperfect, which we would call the future, which describe action which is not yet complete. All the verbs shown above are shown in the perfect tense or past tense. In Biblical Hebrew, the perfect tense is sometimes used to describe present completed action or even future completed action, as well as past completed action. You'll see this later on. You can drop out now if you want. Yes. In this book, however, the perfect tense will be treated as if it were equivalent to the English past tense. In English, there are many ways to describe action in the past. In Hebrew, there is only one way. The Hebrew sentence David Shamar can be translated to English, depending on context, as David guarded, David did guard, David was guarding, David has guarded, David had guarded, right? Although, if you added the word like haya, which is to be, you could make it more specific, you know, because then it would mean something like David used to guard, or David was sort of in the habit of guarding. You'll see. Okay.
Plus
So-
they syntactically lose sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes syntactically loose. Yeah. In English, there is an indefinite article, a or an, as in a man or an I. In Hebrew, there is no indefinite article. Therefore, melech can mean either king or a king, depending on the context. In both English and Hebrew, there is a definite article. In English, the definite article is a separate word, the. In Hebrew, the definite article is attached to the noun and cannot stand alone. The definite article, hey, usually has the patach, the little dash vowel, under it, followed by a dagesh in the next letter. Now, the fact that ha has a dot that goes in the first letter of the word that the ha is attaching to is something that, like, I'm guessing nobody has ever noticed before. You have to look at like a correctly vocalized like prayer book. But take a look. You see melech? And then if you want to say the king, it's ha melech, and the mem gets a dagesh, gets a dot. Okay?
Why? What is a dot? What is a dot in the middle of that that doesn't change the the sound?
Right.
Do?
So here, yeah. So let's.
I've always wondered about that.
All right.
I
Let's.
came to this class with that question.
That question in
Yes.
mind, wanting to
That's
know.
right, yes.
So he is on now, Phil. I am really. Plus, this is being live streamed, so all my Orthodox colleagues are like, "Let's see if the Reform Rabbi knows anything." No, not really. God, I should think about the fact that it's being streamed. Okay, so all right. So, I'm trying to think of how to do this without making it overly complicated. Really, in Hebrew, the dagesh, the dot, is a grammatical device. Okay, it is a grammatical device, and almost like or analogous to the fact that there are 2 shva'im, that there are 2 different kinds of 2 dots. The na, the one that moves, and the nach, the one that rests or is silent. Right? There are actually 2 categories of dagesh. I'm gonna be so sorry you asked this question. All right. So the first kind of dagesh is called a dagesh kal. Kal literally means light or easy. Okay? And it appears under certain circumstances. The other kind of dagesh, when I make an H with a dot under it, it means ch, instead of using the ch, the ch, right? The other one is called a dagesh chazak. What's chazak mean? Chazak, when you chazek, strong.
Strong. Yeah.
Right, like when we say chazak, when you chazek, when we finish up with the Torah, like we did on Simchat Torah. So, a dagesh chazak, putting a dagesh chazak is characteristic of certain kind of grammatical situations, such as the idea that that when you want to say something, right, like melech, right, the mem gets a dot. I'm sort of going downhill there, sorry about that. Alright, so here's the thing. We don't bother teaching kids about this stuff because Hebrew, unfortunately, on the level that we're teaching, I say unfortunately, right? The level that we're teaching them on is learn how to read. Okay? So, we only teach them about the dot when the dagesh changes the sound of the letter. Now, the fact is, grammatically, kaf and chaf, bet and vet, right?
Shin and sin.
No, that's different, right? Pei and fei. Yeah, shin and sin are actually different letters. Okay.
Alright.
Pei and fei, kaf and chaf, bet and vet. Grammatically, they're the same, right? There's no difference grammatically between these two, or these two. In other words, in terms of a root, it's the same letter, same letter, same letter. The only reason we bother teaching about these separately is because it's a case where the dot changes the sound. Okay? Every letter of the Hebrew alphabet, for grammatical reasons, can pick up a dagesh, can pick up a dot, okay, except for the ones that don't take the shva, right? The guttural letters, right? Ayin never takes a dagesh, right? Aleph doesn't take a dagesh. Chet, I don't think ever takes a dagesh. Hey, on rare occasions does, but it's not really a dagesh, and that in those cases is considered to be a different critter. Okay, so those letters don't take a dagesh. Any other one does. Now so why would a letter have a dagesh besides the fact that like ha picks up one? I'll give you another one. You guys know about the idea of roots, right? So a root is a sequence of 3 letters, sometimes 4. There are some 4-letter roots, but usually let's say 3. 3 letters, right? And the 3 letters, this is part of what makes Hebrew and Semitic languages in general so fascinating, is that the 3 letters denote a concept. And then by monkeying around with prefixes and suffixes and vowels, you get all these words that are related to the concept. Okay? Okay. As you are, for example, conjugating verbs, right? Remember I said that there are different verb cases? Okay. You can forget all of this, but I'll just say it once just to give you an example. This is just, my purpose of this is not for you to like learn this or know it. It's to basically reassure you that this is not chaotic or arbitrary. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's not chaotic or arbitrary. There's reasons, although we're not going to go deep into them at this point. Okay. So, there is a, we're doing okay. There is a verb case. In Hebrew, it is called PL. It looks like that. In Hebrew, it's called PL. PL happens to be repetitive or intensive action. Okay, it tends to be used for that. So, in PL roots, in the PL case, let's say here's the 3 letters of the root, right? 1, some random root. Letter 1, letter 2, Letter 3. In the PL verb case, okay, one of the things that makes PL PL is that the middle letter of the root always gets a dagesh. It gets a dagesh chazak. It gets a dot in it. Okay? So that's why that dot is there. Dagesh kal is easier to explain, okay, in the sense that it's pretty standard. For one thing, there are certain letters of the Hebrew alphabet, I'll show you what they are in a second. There are certain letters of the Hebrew alphabet that, if they are the first letter of the word, they always get the dagesh kal, the so-called light dagesh. They are easy to remember. There is a mnemonic. We call them the beged kefet letters. Bet, gimel, dalid. Beged means clothes. It's the root meaning like clothes or clothing or dress. And then kaf, fe, and taf. Okay. So, those 6 letters, when they are the first letter of a root of a word, they get a dot in them. That's just the grammatical convention. So, for example, there is no native Hebrew word that begins with the sound f. Why? Because as soon as that is the first letter of the word, it picks up a dot, and it's a p. It's Pord Motor Company.
Oh, okay.
President Gerald Ford, right? Now, I'll give you one kind of fun example of how this works. So, I'm having trouble with my irons. Okay. Anybody? I'm sorry for the sloppy iron. Anybody read that?
Paro.
Paro. Who's Paro?
Pharaoh.
Pharaoh. Okay. So Pharaoh in Hebrew is Paro, right? Suppose I want to say, though, that I gave something to Pharaoh. Watch what happens. If I say I gave something to Pharaoh, the prefix for to or for is li. But now that's not the first letter of the word anymore. So the dot goes away, and it becomes lifaro. Not liparo, lifaro. Yeah.
Well, okay.
Lefaro ulachol abadav, to Pharaoh and all his courtiers and all this, right? So, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there has to be at least one thing that made it worth the gas to get here, right? So maybe for you the dagesh kal was it.
So are there exceptions, and if we see things in the prayer book that don't conform to this, is it an exception or is it a mistake? Because there are,
there are exceptions. There are a lot of exceptions, or some exceptions, in biblical Hebrew. And the sort of big sloppy generic reason is that the trope marks monkey with some of this. They monkey with the vowels sometimes. Like, just to go a little bit off the reservation for a second, the 2 big pausal signs are et nachta and sof pasuk. They're the big pauses. Sometimes, for example, the sof pasuk and the et nachta, because they're big pauses, will elongate certain vowels, right? I'm blanking on an example right now, but there are things like that, right? Where it will become aretz instead of eretz. Eta aretz, because it's end of a sentence, it sort of gets elongated, kind of like, But God, I mean, there was a time many years ago, my first year of rabbinical school in Israel, taking biblical Hebrew, that I had to actually know why that was, but I know, and some of the principles. But when you see weird looking, like, oh, why didn't that, it's often a trope thing, okay? Okay, so, Beged Kefet, those letters, all things being equal, get a dagesh when they're the first letter of the word, okay? The dagesh chazak, the dot, what means a strong dagesh, a strong dot, is usually a function of like certain grammar, certain verb cases and things like that. There's another case called hitpa'el that does the same thing, where the middle letter of the root gets a dot. Well, what if the middle letter of the root is aleph, ayin, hey, chet, or resh, one of those letters that can't take a dot? Okay, then the vowels change to compensate. Okay, the thing is, the grammar of Hebrew is very orderly and rule bound, so that even the so-called exceptions are usually like mini rules themselves. They're just kind of obscure little ones that don't come up all that often, but it's very, very orderly. I remember when I was first studying Hebrew, seriously, my first year of rabbinical school, thinking that in some ways Hebrew felt like a language that somebody just sat down and made up, because it's just so like Klingon, you know, like somebody just like sat down and kind
Well,
of.
with modern Hebrew, that's kind of.
That is the
way.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, right, Eliezer ben Yehuda, right? And
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this whole rabbit hole that we just went down, which I'm glad we did, is about the whole dot thing. Okay. So let's go through the examples, right? So we're on page 28. So the definite article, we're going to go Hebrew style, right? So we're going to go right to left. So the definite article is ha, the. Na'ar is young man. The young man is ha-na'ar, right? And there's a gesh in the nun. Now, Phil, just to get back to your point, we don't bother teaching kids about dots in the nun. In fact, in most kids' books, that wouldn't even bother having the dot because they're learning how to read. And there's a case where, yeah, grammatically there's a dot in the nun, but since the sound of nun doesn't change, screw it. Like, who cares, right? We're just not going to bother with it, right? Okay. Ha plus davar. Ah, wait a minute. Whoa. Why is there a dot already in the Dalet? Look up on the board. It's one of those Beged Kefet letters, and it picks up the dot that Dagesh Kal, right? Again, like, you don't have to, there's no test on this, you don't have to remember, but again, at least you know it's not chaotic and arbitrary, right? So it becomes Hadavar. Ha plus Ben, the son, okay, why does that have a dot in there? Because it's one of those Beged Kefet letters, right? Becomes Haben, right? Ha plus bait becomes habait. Okay. The definite article in the 5 gutturals. Okay, when a definite article comes before a word that begins with one of the 5 guttural letters, there they are again, resh, het, resh, ayin, chet, hey, and aleph, the ha may change to ha spelled with a kamatz, the little t vowel. You see where I am?
Mm-hmm.
Or even he, right? And there is no dagesh in the following letter. So, let me give you an example, right? When we're singing, you were there. Sing. No, when we're singing, just break into a show tune. No, when we're singing, we had, oh, you were there too. Were you?
Yeah,
right.
Francis
You were there for
yeah, the
yesterday.
3 of us were there.
Okay, so when we're singing Hallel, B'tzeit Yisrael mi Mitzrayim Beit Yaakov el me amlo ez. Hayta lehuda lekacho. It's taking a long word. It's like a very long joke with a short punchline. Yisrael mam shalotav hayam ra'av ayanos. Okay, and then we want to say that the mountains skipped like gazelles. So the word for mountains is harim, but it's not ha-harim, it's he-harim. Whoa, was it worth the trouble to get there? Probably not, right? But it's he-harim because the dagesh from the ha can't go in the, right? Right? So when you see like something like a strange vowel like he-harim, it's probably because the first letter of the word without the ha is one of these gutturals that can't take the dot, right? Again, just to know why, right? So take a look, right? So ish is man, right? Read across, the man is ha-ish, which sounds exactly the same to us reading Sephardic Hebrew, right? Except, sneakily, right, the vowel under the hey, the ha in ha-ish is a kamatz, right? Ir is city. Ha-ir, right? Because the ayin can't take that dot, right? So ha-ir, it becomes a kamatz down at the bottom of page 28, and then like he-harim, right? Arim means cities. You don't say ha-arim, you say he-arim.
So is that a difference because of the plural?
It's a difference because of the ayin.
No, but it's ha'ir and it's he-arim. So when you say
Arim is plural. Arim is plural.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
So you use.
So that's why you use
Why is it that way?
Why is it because it's plurals?
I am guessing it has to do. This is really a guess on my part. Sometimes these things are the way they are because they're easier to pronounce. Like if you're doing a serious guttural ayin, ha'arim is maybe a little harder to say, but ha'arim just trips off the tongue a bit
But
more.
then there's the newspaper Haaretz.
Ha'aretz, right. That's a good
Or
one.
is it Haaretz? No, it's Haaretz.
Well, in that case, it's actually,
Instead of Haaretz.
it's interesting. In that case, it's the vowel under the aleph has changed, because the word for land is Eretz. Eretz Yisrael, but then it becomes Haaretz.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to say at one time in my life I could have given you a really legit answer on that. I don't remember now. There's a reason for it. I don't remember why. But it all has to do, it's a combination, I think, of pronunciation and this whole business with these dots. Which again, like, you know, when we're learning how to read, we don't bother teaching people about a dagesh and a dalet, or because it's like it doesn't change the sound. It's just enough just to read it. Okay? Nouns that are definite by nature. So they're going to tell you the proper names and place names are definite, right? So Ha'ish Zachar, the man remembered. Abraham Zachar, Abraham remembered. So proper names are, you know, Hamelech Hamad, the king stood. You wouldn't say HaDavid, just like you wouldn't say the faith, right? You would just say faith. It's specific. All right. So now they have these exercises, okay? I would encourage you to do as many of these as you can, okay? Try to learn the vocabulary, only because that will enable us. I mean, a really lovely way to do this would be a chapter a week. We may not always be able to do that. It's nice for a small class, you're all good readers, really smart. You know, if it's getting too much, or you're confused, or we need to slow down, we can. But can we try to you know, get the material list chapter under our belt so that for next week?
Through chapter 4.
Yep.
Just chapter 4.
Okay.
Yeah, because I wouldn't even try to get, I think this is plenty of brain stimulation for this week, and we're not dealing with feminine yet. I will, however, give you the, hold on. Let me look at the thing here. Let's see if I can find this right back. There's a whole vocabulary list at the back, there's all kinds of reference stuff. Verb conjugation, spelling charts. Right, like, where is it? If you take a look, like, over, here we go. I can't find it right now. But if you look, just for example, like, go over to page 324. On 324, you have Rapunzel in biblical Hebrew.
Oh, great.
You can read and translate Rapunzel in biblical Hebrew. Vayhi vayamim hahem, vaychiyu ish ushmo Moshe, vayisha ushma Sarah, vayishvu beveitam. Right, so there's that. You could do that. If you go over to page 352, they have Alibaba and the 40 Thieves there. Now, there used to be Daedalus and Icarus. Maybe I'm just not seeing it. It used to be also that they gave you here Rumpelstiltskin. Oh, here you go. Here you go. Look at page 283.
We've become conjoined.
Yeah. Page 283 at the bottom. By the end of the book, what they have you doing is basically you can read and translate a somewhat simplified version of the book of Ruth. You can actually read and translate Ruth, right? So if you were to sort of get to the end of this book, we should all live and be well, right? God bless you. If we were to get to the end of this book, you would be at a point, even before you got to the end of the book, where you could like follow the Torah reading and like actually understand parts of it as you followed it. and prayer book Hebrew certainly, which is simple compared to most of this. Okay? So that's the fun part that's in store. Any questions? Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Get done what you can get done. Try to do the work on this chapter, and we will devour chapter 5 next time.
Great. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Yay! And then I'm gonna go. Let's see. How do I stop this? I go. Oop. Slide.